future.
Today, space technology has entered every Indian household, and that was precisely the commitment and vision envisaged by our founding father Vikram Sarabhai.
A professor, a clinical practitioner, a published author, a politician. Dr. Jitendra Singh is a man who wears many hats. Dr. Singh took an unconventional path to becoming one of India's key cabinet ministers. Today, he holds multiple portfolios. He is the Union Minister of State Independent Charge for the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Earth Sciences. He also serves as the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office for Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions, Department of Atomic Energy and Department of Space. Born in 1956 in Jammu, Dr. Singh rose to prominence in politics after he joined BJP in 2012, quitting his post as a professor of diabetes and endocrinology at Government Medical College and Hospital, Jammu. He was inducted as the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office in 2014 as a first-time Lok Sabha member. In 2019, he won the second time from the Udhampur constituency in Jammu and Kashmir. In 2024, Dr. Singh was re-elected and retained his ministries in the third Modi ministry. Before entering full-time politics, Dr. Jitendra Singh was a doctor of diabetes and endocrinology, holding an MBBS degree from Stanley Medical College, Chennai, and an MD from Government Medical College, Jammu. Dr. Singh authored several books, including the bestseller Diabetes Made Easy. As Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Singh launched India's first indigenously made research vessel, Sindhu Sadhana, in 2014 in Goa. Under his leadership, India's space journey made it to the spotlight, from Chandrayaan-3 on the moon to Aditya L1 towards the sun. Dr. Singh also spearheaded reforms to address governance-related grievances nationwide. From caring for patients to overseeing the country's scientific and strategic governance, Dr. Jitendra Singh stands out as a multifaceted leader who has relentlessly served the nation and its people in every role he has taken on.
Well, it's an exciting moment globally, but perhaps a more consequential one for India, given the role it can play in innovation and also shaping the healthcare system as a whole. And there are many questions that, we have, that we want answers to. And of course, particularly among them is what this opportunity, looks like for India. And to ask some of those questions, I would like to invite on stage my colleague Shreya Upadhyay.
Good afternoon, Dr. Singh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can we once again have a huge round of applause? We don't get Dr. Singh every day among us to have our questions answered. So thank you very much. It's an honor for us to have you here with us. Can I start by asking you where we stand as a country in terms of public health care? The Prime Minister has a vision of Viksit Bharat 2047, and one of the most crucial parameters in becoming a developed country by 2047, in becoming a superpower, is public health care. Where do we stand at the moment, and what is the vision ahead? What's the roadmap ahead?
I think the easiest way to understand where we stand is to look back and recall where we stood, say, a decade and a half ago. As Churchill always said, the longer we look back, the further we look forward. And if you look back about 2 decades back, India was never taken seriously for its healthcare practices across the world. Rather, it was not talked about or seen very highly. And I think there was a reason for that, because as a society, we were never very health conscious or medically conscious. If someone fell sick, They would wait for 3-4 days. If they didn't get well, then they would visit a doctor. अगर ठीक हो गए, माँ का आशीर्वाद. अगर नहीं रहे तो पिछले जन्मों का कर्म. So you had homemade placebos to take care of yourself. And today, the same country, or the same nation, or the same society, which was not taken seriously for its therapeutic healthcare practices, is today being hailed as a global leader in preventive healthcare, mind you, not curative. Bimari na ho uske liye, we are now leading the world. We were the first to come out with the DNA vaccine in COVID, and then also offer it to 30 other countries. Now we have HPV vaccine, which is known to be effective in cervical cancers, more so common among females, and likewise. So I think there's a paradigm shift, not only where we stand, but also as the world looks up to us. Today we are, as far as our biopharma products is concerned, or biomanufacturing is concerned, we stand number 3, India Pacific, number 12 or number 13 globally. We have made a niche for ourselves in producing devices, heart valves, which are cost effective, without compromise on the quality, as a result of which we are also exporting, and we are also attracting medical tourism from outside. So that's a huge, huge change in nature. And I think we are now gone are the days when you had you would recall the old timers that once upon a time, or 30 years back or 35 years, a place like Houston became very famous in India because any VIP had a heart attack, he would go to Houston for a bypass surgery. It's no longer so. Anything that is available, any part of the world is also available over here, and that too at a more cost-effective option. As a result of which, India is now emerging as a preferred healthcare destination for people from across the world. And we have also qualified in our indigenous capacities. Only last year we came out with the first ever indigenous antibiotic. Earlier on, all the antibiotics, the trials were done outside, the salt was developed outside, right from the day the first ever antibiotic came to this world, which was penicillin, that time described as the queen of medicines. Then the successive generations of antibiotics, whether the streptomycin, chlorophenicol, tetracycline, the gram-negative ones. We have now come out with 2 antibiotics, trials done in India, and being marketed by, of course, that's in PPP model. The nephromycin, which is found to be effective more effective in the resistant respiratory infections, which are commonly seen in the immunocompromised hosts like the COVID patients, or the cancer patients, or uncontrolled diabetics, is being manufactured by a Mumbai-based multinational. And the other one is, I think, Zyfi, which is again effective against gram-negative infections and E. coli, more effective in the urinary tract infections. So I think we have now come, and one more example which I like to share because that will be quite amusing for the audience in this room. Hemophilia. We are the first to have come out with a successful gene-driven trial, genetic remedy for hemophilia, which is a clotting disorder. And why I'm saying that this room will find it interesting is that if you go back to the history of medicine, it is said that the first ever case of hemophilia, the deficiency of clotting factor 8, was discovered in one of the cousins of Queen Victoria. So not only that we have qualified in diseases emanating from India, namely the tropical diseases, the communicable diseases, we are now also in a position to find solutions about diseases or solutions for diseases which originated from the West. So it's a huge change. And most of this has happened in only the last 12 years, after the 26th of May 2014 when Prime Minister Modi was sworn in. So I think we have enough evidence to say that.
So You know, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Singh is also a diabetologist, and I'm going to take the leverage a little later,
I'm basically
sir.
one.
Yeah, he was, but we'll take the leverage.
I'm still.
Yeah, I'll take the leverage of taking guideline and advice.
Unfortunately, a doctor once is a doctor always. A captain once is a captain
Absolutely.
always. Even a general retired continues to be a general.
Absolutely. So I'll take that leverage of taking advice from you a little later into our discussion. But sir, you mentioned medical tourism, and that is for sure. India has witnessed, you know, a lot of people coming from abroad here for treatment. But domestically, I want to understand from you, how far have we been able to bridge that gap between rural and urban India? The kind of shortages of doctors, the kind of crises and situations that we've seen our people staying in the rural areas face, have we been able to bridge that and get it to at least, if not equal, but closer to the urban level?
No, I agree with you. That is, of course, an issue which has been confronting the country for quite some time, but I think headway is being made in that, and there's a continuous effort in that direction. For example, this Ayushman Bharat. Now, this is a unique health insurance company. I think the first of its kind in the world. And those of us who've been practitioners like me would bear me out that most of the health insurance schemes earlier did not insure you for a pre-existing disease. Suppose you had a heart disease or an underlying coronary heart disease, your insurance will cover all the other organs, not heart. And even, God forbid, if you had a heart attack and you claimed premium, they would try to prove by hook or crook that you had camouflaged it. I mean, they were so conservative. Now, here is a disease. If someone is detected having a cancer, the next day after detection, he can go and he or she can get himself insured under Ayushman Bharat and claim that, all that amount. So that is one aspect. So it's being addressed at multiple levels. Secondly, of course, they increase the number of the medical colleges, the medical schools, the government sector to make the education more accessible, and also this recent announcement also in the budget of having cancer care facility in each of the districts. As far as our Tata Memorial Center Mumbai is concerned, which is also associated with one of the departments that I am dealing with, the Department of Atomic Energy. We have now set up 11 such hospitals across the country, considering the prevalence of cancer going up. Last year we had 12 lakh new reported cases of cancer in this country, and the way it is going up, it might go up to over 20 lakhs in the next 3-4 years. So 11 of the full-fledged hospitals, and say about maybe around 200 or so of the hospitals where they are providing some kind of a cancer care facility. So we are in an expansionist mode, plus also the private sector being taken on board, because the demarcation between the public and the private sector in every sphere has been done away with. As I said, it's being dealt with at the multiple level, which would also imply, which is not something which is often discussed, is that in the last budget, when we came out recently, in the last session, we came out with the Shanti Act to open the nuclear sector to the private players. One of the components which is got underreported because it didn't catch the imagination was that even the nuclear medicine research has been thrown open to private sector. And there's fascinating things happening in nuclear medicine. Even if you see the Tatas, they've come out with a possible cure for acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a kind of a blood cancer commonly prevalent in children. They're also working on liver, both cirrhosis as well as carcinoma. So so what I said, when I said multiple ends, A, at the level of outreach, B, at the level of making research more inclusive, three, C, at the level of pooling resources from different sources, both domestically, internationally. And yes, the issue still continues because we have deficiency of healthcare professionals in many parts of the country. But I think year by year, the situation is changing. So gradually, earlier on there were multiple factors, because some of the doctors trained in the urban areas or cosmopolitans would not even find comfortable living in a very suburban area or a remote rural area, which is also not so now. There's also a lot of democratization in the lifestyles in India. So it's a very holistic thing. Why a doctor doesn't go to a particular spot is not only for professional reasons, of course that's important, because he has many other options in the cities, but also for the entire ecosystem about the family being raised there, the children being raised there. So all that is now changing. So society evolves as a whole. So I think a difference is happening. Though I agree with you, we still need to do a lot much in that direction, and the endeavor has to continue.
So far we've talked about what you and the government have been doing. Now I want to talk about what challenges you face in implementation. Because when you talk about an HPV vaccine, about cervical cancer, there's less awareness among people, even lesser willingness to adopt the kind of practices that are needed to prevent such diseases. Or when the Prime Minister talks about menstrual hygiene from the ramparts of the Red Fort. In terms of implementation, because it requires personal habits to change, at the government level, at the level of ASHA workers, self-help groups who implement these on ground, what are the kind of challenges that the government faces from the people?
No, I agree with you. You can't leave everything to the governments. It has to be a collective effort. But as I said in my opening remark, in response to your opening question, that there's a paradigm shift from what it was till about a decade back and what it is today. Today, a common Indian citizen is much, much more health conscious. As I said, earlier they had homemade remedies, homemade placebos, even for the prognosis going bad. It's no longer so. People are now increasingly becoming, subjecting themselves to regular health checkups, also to preventive methods. Sometimes it's being overdone also, though that's not very polite to say. But there's a change happening, and I think that's a multifactorial outcome, because we were a society which had just got out of 200 years of colonial rule. We were struggling for the basics of life, for the basic amenities of life. I used to come across patients, because my 95 or 99% practice was diabetic, so they would draw a calendar and skip medicine twice a week, or skip medicine 4 days a month. And I would find some resident, scolding the patient. Then I would quietly call the boy and tell him, you try to understand his sensitivity, because for a person who is have-not, his most precious possession is the self-respect. Maybe he doesn't want to say that he can't afford, because he has to take care of the other expenses as well for the family. So issues of affordability were there for non-compliance. Of course, the social beliefs were also there. But all that is undergoing change, just as it is undergoing change overall in your standard of living, also in the level of aspiration. The aspirations were also limited. So I think it's gradually, we are an evolving society, and we're just about 80 years past independence, and 80 years is a very small lifespan in the age of a nation. For a human being, it appears that but for a nation, when the history is written 80 years, do not occupy even the footnote of a chapter. It is written in the Ras.
Yeah, that's true. We're a very young nation as compared to other countries.
Absolutely, absolutely.